information. Um, so feel free. Yes, I will share the recording. Absolutely. Um, you can share questions in the chat. And our other advisory members and veteran coaches will help answer those questions as well as we go through all of our information. So our coach expectations, the number one that is absolute the most important. Um, I will send the recording to Playfly and AIA so that they can email it out to everyone. I try to upload it to YouTube, so it's an easy link. You don't have to worry about file size. We will also post the YouTube link in Discord so that you have access both in your email and on Discord. It just usually takes me a day or so for Google to populate it and then for me to upload it to YouTube. But you should have it by the end of the week for sure. So for our coaches, one up we have. So first, let's backtrack. AIA, when they first accepted esports as an athletic activity, they also created bylaws, just like traditional sports have them. One of the things in our bylaw is that all students must be competing in the same location. So there's no competing from home. There's no, oh, two kids will be at this land center and two kids will be at this land center. Everyone has to be in the exact same location, preferably your campus. But I know there was one year I didn't have the technology on my campus, so we traveled as a team to a land center and competed there. That was completely okay because our team was all together. Um, then so along with that, we ask that the coach be present. You have to make sure that you are present for all practices and all games, not just for the supervision piece, but realize there's a lot of communication that needs to happen between you and your opponent. So it's important that you are there. If for some reason something happens and you're out of town, you're sick, just make sure you have an assistant coach or another staff member that can step in your place that knows how to use the systems to still carry on with those communications for in-game. Make sure all your players are playing on their main accounts. This is specific for League of Legends and for Rocket League. But for League of Legends, there is actual scouting that goes on. So the account that students register on Playfly is the account that your opponents will use to scout your team. We don't want to be using Smurf accounts to try to deceive our teams of what skill or what champion students are playing. We understand that a lot of students do have Smurf accounts. We just ask that you be the hold them accountable to making sure that during the season they're only using their one registered account for their practices and for all of their games. Monitor all games, chats, streams, avoid toxic behavior and comments. We know that for a lot of our students, it's second nature to type something in chat, to just a quick emote. That can sometimes be perceived as toxic, and sometimes their words can be very toxic. Recognize that a lot of our schools are beginning to stream, and a lot of our games are going out to our community and to the public. And the chat does appear a lot of the time. So we want to make sure that we are representing ourselves and are respecting our opponents when we are in a live match that is potentially being viewed by our community. So make sure you have those conversations with your teams. I know I have a rule from my team. There's no chat allowed whatsoever in scrimmages or in games, with the exception of good luck, have fun, GG, nice job. But to really try to cut back on some of that negativity so that nothing can be perceived as us being toxic in any way. Again, all teams must play in the same location. And then ultimately, if you see something, say something. We don't necessarily want to see it as like ratting a team out, but the only way we're going to grow and get better is if we hold each other accountable. And as the coaches, as the adults in the room, we want to make sure that we're holding our teams and our opponents to the highest of standards so that our industry can continue to grow within the high school setting. And we don't leave room for anyone to bring in negativity into what we're trying to build. Discord. Again, our Discord's for coaches only. We ask you that you change your nickname to your name with your school name. Try to avoid abbreviations. I always tell students, like with GHS, it could be Globe, it could be Glendale, it could be Greenway. It could, there's several options for a GHS, right? So please try to use your name. Is there a quick reference for disabling chat? I know League of Legends, you can disable it and it's not hard at all. There's a lot of quick guides online that can show you. League of Legends and Smash, I'm not sure if it can be disabled. Can someone else speak to those two games? Not an expert in those two for sure. So we'll see if somebody puts in chat. Okay, so Rocket League, you can disable chat as well. I'm not sure if you can in Smash, but we'll see. Yeah, absolutely. So on Discord again, you can add Playfly. You can also add other schools. So if you know that, sorry, the chat completely distracted me. If you know what school you're playing and you're trying to get a hold of the coach and they're not responding on Playfly or trying to get a reschedule for your spring break game or something along those lines, you can go on Discord and just at Gilbert High and it will send me a ping and any of my assistant coaches that I may have on Discord. However, realize not all schools are on Discord. So just realize if an @ isn't available, then that could be why they're just not on there. All right. Then for reschedules, this is for varsity only. So JV teams will join up with the queue like we did in fall season. Varsity is the only one that's going to have a preset schedule, meaning when the season starts, you will have your entire list of who you're playing week 1 through week 11. You are getting scheduled for your spring break because we all have different spring breaks. Some of us have 2 weeks, some of us have 1 week. So it is your responsibility to get those spring break schedules rescheduled. Both parties have to agree. So if Desiree and I are playing each other, I can't just go in there and say, oh, we're going to play on April 2nd and that's it. Like it has to be a dialogue between you and that coach for you to find a time that works for both of your teams. However, our reschedules have to be arranged by the week of February 11th. You have to request and finalize your schedule by the 11th. After the 11th, you cannot request another reschedule. So as soon as you get your schedule, look at your opponent, start reaching out. You can reach out on Playfly. You can reach out on Discord. On Playfly, you can see the coach's email address. You can also email them directly. So please make sure that you do that as soon as possible. On the flip side, if you get a message from a coach asking for a reschedule, please promptly reply. In the past, we've had challenges where coaches don't reply to a lot of reschedule requests, and it just slows down the process, and it makes it challenging to communicate with all of our students and parents. This YouTube link, I will share out the presentation with everyone. And actually, I believe I can do this right now. Not sure if permissions. There we go. Viewer, share. For some reason, if it doesn't give you access to it, I can give you access after the presentation. There's a YouTube video that will show you how to request any reschedules. Just make sure you do them by February 11th. So as of right now, we're looking at about 4 weeks. So as soon as that schedule is released, realize you're not going to have a lot of time to nail down those reschedules. So please do that as soon as possible. Any questions about reschedules? Perfect. Team names and student accounts. Your team name has to include your school name, and it has to include what level your team is. So for my League of Legends team, I have Gilbert, Varsity, LOL. For my Smash, I just have Gilbert, Varsity, Smash. I have Gilbert, JV1, Smash, JV2, Smash. We do ask again, no abbreviations. Again, GHS could be a bunch of different schools. So please make sure that you use your actual name. I know for some schools it becomes really long, but it helps us to identify what school we're working with. And then, of course, the varsity and JV. For student names, specifically for League of Legends and for Rocket League, please make sure your students have appropriate names. Avoid any references to the 420, to 69, any sort of body parts. I always tell my kids, if you have to ask, it's probably a no. All right. and report anything that you see questionable. If you see a roster when you're scouting and you see a name that's inappropriate or that you feel it's inappropriate, please let Playfly know. Again, it's that idea of see something, say something. We are constantly trying to bring legitimacy to our programs. And sometimes having those inappropriate names kind of delegitimizes us. Again, we are streaming our games, we are showing them to our community, and we want to make sure that we're above reproach. All right. Subs, rosters, and forfeit. So rosters cannot be changed 24 hours prior to your game. So if your game starts on Wednesday at 4 o'clock for Smash, you have until Tuesday at 4 o'clock to adjust your rosters. Kind of a tip for all of our new coaches, have a couple extra students on your roster that are going to serve as your subs. So you're not having to make any last minute adjustments. If Johnny gets sick, the sub is already on your roster. So my Smash varsity roster does not just have 3 people, it has 5. So that I have 2 extra subs already ready to go in the event that someone is not available and I'm not caught scrambling or have a locked roster and can't add anybody else. And you can do that with all of them. So like my JV1 has 2 of my JV2 players and my JV2 has 2 of my JV3 players. Just a way to kind of help you out. Each varsity JV player can sub for varsity. However, they can only sub for a maximum of 3 games. After they play, not just sit on the roster, but if they play 3 games on varsity, they can no longer level down to JV. So just be very mindful about your subs to make sure that you don't exceed that number unless you want them to permanently be a varsity player. Double check that the account matches the roster. So when you log in for League of Legends or Rocket League, check the roster that is on Playfly and make sure those names match. We've had some coaches at the end of the game, they're like, oh, those games don't match, and they try to report it. Playfly can't do anything because you've already played the match. Do not start the match until those names match up. That is our only way to ensure that the right student is playing on the team, is to verify the account. So please just double check your rosters before you get started. Varsity is allowed a maximum of 2 forfeits. Because we are scheduled when you forfeit, a team loses an opportunity to play. If you forfeit more than 2 times, you will not be eligible for playoffs. So even if you are the 3rd team in your group, you will not advance to playoffs if you have forfeited more than 2 times. Submit your forfeits as soon as possible. That's just a common courtesy. It allows your opponent to have time to find a scrimmage, to find a meaningful game, for their team to still be able to play when you weren't able to. Any no-shows, you now only have 15 minutes. After 15 minutes of a no-show with no communication, it will count as a forfeit. If there is a no-show and the coach is communicating saying, we can't play because our network is down, or the power went out in our building, or, something that is beyond their control, that is an option to reschedule. Even if it's past the deadline for reschedules, just have to contact Playfly, and as long as both teams agree, that is an extenuating circumstance that can be arranged for a reschedule. Think about in traditional sports, like if there's lightning, or there's some of those things that are completely out of our control and AIA has to stop the game. Those are similar to those situations. Johnny has a doctor's appointment and I don't have a full team. That's no longer a legitimate reason. Questions about subs, rosters, and forfeits?
Yeah, it's my first time, so I have a lot of questions, but it's only one varsity team and 1 JV team for each game, correct?
So 1 varsity team, yes, but you can have as many JV teams as you want and as you feel you can manage. I can say from experience, sometimes you got to cap it for yourself. I tried one time having 5 JV teams for Smash, and absolutely not. It was way too much to manage because everyone is playing at the same time. varsity and JV play the same time, and every team is playing against a different school. So you are contacting that many different coaches and managing all of those teams. So you decide what that cap is for you. I have learned for myself I can manage 3 JVs for Smash. Fall season I did 4, and it was okay. It wasn't too bad. But yeah, JV you can have as many as you want. It's varsity that you can only have 1 team for varsity.
Okay, so if I have, just as an example, 9 kids that want to play Super Smash and it's only rounds of 3, should I funnel a lot of those extras into JV, or should I keep them as alternates since they won't get to play that much?
I would keep them as JV. So what I do, and some other coaches could chime in as well. So I have my 3 starters, which always start at varsity. My JV1, or the kids are just right beneath, and they will be my subs. They will still play every week as JV1. But if I need to pull one of them for a sub, I will pull them from JV and let them play in varsity.
Okay.
And as long as they only play varsity for 3 games, no more than 3 games, they can still stay on JV for the remainder of the season. So sub them in once, sub them in twice. That's all good. You don't really want them to sub in much more than that, but they can still play. If you don't need them to sub, they can still play on their JV team every
Okay.
week.
And then just one last question because you brought it up. The Playfly, is that the link that somebody sent me where you log in and view your seasons? Is that same website? Because that's where I'm having all my kids sign up at.
Yes, absolutely. Playfly, the website is AZE Preps. It's the link that Joe just sent. But yes, that is the Playfly platform. You will see that's where you will put your rosters. That's where you will see your schedule. That's where you'll queue up for JV. That's where everything happens, is on that platform.
Okay, so I need to get all the kids registered on that thing with their personal emails, correct?
Yes, I would
Okay.
recommend personal emails. A lot of the school emails block the
Yeah.
confirmation email, and it kind of gets to be a nightmare. So yeah, personal emails are significantly better.
Okay. I'll have more questions, but I'll leave
Okay,
it there now.
you're totally good.
Okay.
All right, some dates to know. Preseason starts next week. We do 2 weeks of preseason. It's the queue system. So what that means is at 3:50 to 4:05, you log in to your Playfly account and you join the queue. You are saying, I have my 5 League of Legends players and we're ready to play. I have my 3 Smash players and we're ready to play. You queue up at 4:05, you will get matched randomly to another school that has queued up. The purpose of these 2 weeks is to work out your tech um, potential issues. If you're a brand new team, get your kids used to the platform, custom matches, getting you used to talking with your opponent on AZE Preps or the Playfly account. If you can't play, not a big deal. There are no reschedules. You just don't queue up. And then you can try again the next week. These games do not count towards the regular season. They don't have anything to do with your placement. They are just essentially scrimmages that are organized by Playfly to get you and your team ready for the regular season. The regular season is 11 weeks long. From January 28th to April 10th. You must reschedule your own spring break, and the reschedule deadline is the week of February 11th. Playoffs are 2 weeks long. April 15th to the 24th. Reschedules are on a case-by-case basis. Again, we're really looking for those extreme situations that require a reschedule. Otherwise, it's about you communicating with coaches and parents, students and parents, to make sure that they are available for those matches. I would say as of the end of March, if you look like you might be a contender for playoff, start communicating with your students and parents. Let them know from the beginning of the season, hey, playoff is during these 2 weeks. You need to make sure that you are available. Especially if like that's your goal. Like our goal is to make it to playoffs. Make sure that everyone's aware to stay available. Yes, you will communicate with other coaches on Playfly. When you check in, there is a chat box that you'll join the chat and you'll just chat back and forth with your opponent. So we don't know how many teams will be allowed in playoffs because that is dependent on how many teams register. Um, so we won't know until registration closes to know how many teams are competing, and then Playfly will make a determination of how many teams will make it to playoffs. Semifinals and state championship are the only games that we do in person. That is a good question. Joe, how early will you guys determine how many teams will make it to playoffs?
The earliest is by the second week of the regular season. Sometimes it runs a little bit later if we have a large number of teams or if we're trying to finalize the state championship venue, but that's typically when we hit it.
So be looking for that announcement around week 2 or week 3 of competition. We'll have that announcement from Playfly on how many teams will make it to playoffs from each group. Semifinals and student championship, like I said, it's in person. We don't have a location fully finalized. There's Playfly is working through a few things with AIA, but it is going to be on May 3rd. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Again, if you know and you are pushing your kids to be a contender for semifinals and championship, might as well go ahead and put that on your calendar and let them know that that is a Saturday. It's pretty much an all-day event. All 3 titles are run in the same day. So just be aware of that. General reminders, League of Legends, students must play on their main account. The one change that we made to League of Legends, students cannot change their summoner name. Whatever they start the season with, they have to finish the season with it. Riot does allow for you to buy a special coin and be able to change your name. Please communicate with your students that that is not allowed. They will not be allowed to change their name on Playfly. So even though they might have in Riot, they have to keep the same name for the duration of the season. League of Legends, when you load in, you have to load in order: top, jungle, mid, ADC, and then support. And League of Legends, any new or reworked champion cannot be played for the first 2 weeks after it's released. Smash, it is a best of 3 per player, but all 3 players always play. So player 1 might only play 2 matches if they win or lose both, but all 3 of your players will play. Smash, you must be hardwired, so no hotspots. Smash, when you check in, you can adjust who is your first, second, and third player. It is no longer when you first check the boxes. You can rearrange them yourself. And then Rocket League network issues or disconnects must be reported prior to the first goal. There are no restarts for Rocket League after a goal has been scored. Yes, they should. So if you tell them that they have to load in this order: top, jungle, mid, ADC, support, they will know who's what. Absolutely. Awesome. League Unlocked. So this was a program that Riot offered a few years ago. Essentially, you filled out a form, gave them your IP address, and then we will get to that one. Steve is allowed. It is no longer banned for Smash. But yeah, that is a change that we made. So League Unlocked was provided to schools. You just provided your IP addresses, and essentially you got every single champion available to you as long as your kids were on the computers in your lab. Those of us that got League Unlocked a couple years ago, you had to redo it every year, but we still have it on our computers for most of us. However, they have not released a new form for any new schools to join League Unlocked. So if you have it, you're more than welcome to use it. If you don't, we have some ideas for you to be able to do picks and bans. For those that might be unfamiliar with League, the reason why that helps is you have to load in that order, right? So top, jungle, mid, ADC, support. But maybe your mid laner is your most inexperienced player and you want to pick their champion first before somebody bans it. So maybe your top laner picks the mid laner, and then later they're going to swap. You can only swap if you own all of those champions. So with League Unlocked, our kids essentially own every champion on their school computers. If you don't have League Unlocked, that makes it a little bit harder to do. So there is an option to do a third-party site. And I have some images here. It has the link for this third-party draft. I believe it is detailed in the rulebook. So this third-party site allows you to create links for you and your opponent where you can load into a separate website and do your picks and bans as if everyone had the champions. Then you go back into the lobby and you pick the right champion for the right, like the top laner picks their own, the mid laner picks their own, but you go based off of what you did in the third-party draft pick tool. If you want to use the third-party draft pick tool, you have to communicate with your coach in advance, just out of pure courtesy, to make sure that you don't have any delays when you get into your game. All right. All right, tech information. Joe, you want to take this one?
Yes, of course. So this is the important stuff. No knock to any IT individuals here, but we know it's difficult getting through district policies, school policies, or sometimes it's just time to figure it out. So we try to make it easy for you with the IT checklist. This is linked out in our rulebooks and resources document, which I'm going to drop in chat right now. And these are some of the highlights. So the most important stuff is make sure your school network is ready for competition. That can be as simple as handing the IT checklist to your IT team. It's going to let them know the domains they need, how to whitelist the games, and then most importantly, a couple details for Smash and for emails in general. So for Smash Bros in particular, you want to have open NAT types for your network. That's going to be type A or type B, as well as an Ethernet connection direct to the Switch dock. And that's just to allow a stronger connectivity. It's required for competitive matches. If your IT team has any concerns over that, because it is an open NAT type on a school network, which tends to be more protected, talk to them about having location or time-based switches for the network security, so that if you're in Mr. Gordon's classroom at 4 p.m., that's when the open network is available during your match times or during your practice times. And then additionally, you want to whitelist our 3 email domains. And this is very important because your school emails will not recognize third parties and they'll try to protect you, which is great until you don't get the information you need from us. So please whitelist at playfi.com, at playfiesports.com, and at leakspot.gg. The 2 PlayFi emails are going to allow me and my team to be able to talk to you over email and to support you with any match concerns, any tech concerns, etc. And then leakspot.gg is going to allow those forgot username passwords, verification emails, all that for the platform setup using school accounts to work. So even if your students are using personal emails, this is going to be great access for you to have for your own school manager account. And then if you need an admin, as Kenya was saying earlier, we recommend the general catch all always. I know that I'm a great guy. I know that I'm around. You'll see me answering a lot of emails, a lot of Discord pings, but I'm not the only guy here. And sometimes I'm just out of the office. So there are 3 ways to contact lead support when it comes to your match chats. You can request a moderator in match chat. That's the platform option. And they'll come in, they'll talk to you, and they'll figure out what it is there in the match chat live. That's where both teams can see it for the match. You can ping at PlayFi in the Discord. That's going to ping the dozen or so individuals that we have and let them know, hey, Kenya needs some support, with her match. Or you can email esports-aia@playfi.com. That one I recommend doing if it's a request that can take longer, just because, the formality of emails, reading it, making sure it sounds proper. And with any of these, no matter what route you take, please try to note down relevant details for our team. That way we can come in and see, hey, Kenya has an issue with their Smash team. Their Ethernet's bugging out. They'd like to reschedule, but they need someone's email or something like that. And any information you can provide just makes it a lot quicker for us to give you the answer, which means it's a lot quicker for you to get on your merry way with the match. And so my email and my phone number are available as well. I'm happy to help whenever I'm around. I'm happy to especially help with those higher level long term issues. But for short term, those are the three options that I recommend to shorten the time to support.
Definitely, that's one of the biggest things I see. I'll see coaches post like, "Hey, I need help with this XYZ," but they didn't ping anyone. You need
Yep.
to make sure you add play flag because otherwise they won't get the notification and they won't know that somebody needs help.
Yep. And one last thing to mention, I kind of glossed over it. On Discord, especially, please do not DM admins individually unless you are asked to, because you might be DMing someone who is off the clock, who won't see your DM for 3 hours, and then you're wondering, where's my support?
Absolutely. All right, some updates for the spring season in particular. Teams can only scrimmage against high school teams affiliated with their state athletic association. There's been a lot of discussion around this. Essentially, it's part of the AIA bylaws as a whole. So we have to recognize that AIA has its own rules that apply to every activity, every sport, and then each individual sport and activity has their own set of bylaws. One of them is about during season playtime. I'm sure most of you have heard, with traditional sports, a student can't play on a club team while the high school season is going on. It's similar to that. So for us, because we're not a sport, we're not quite as restrictive. Our only restriction is that us as a team cannot scrimmage or compete against a college team or against a random team that's affiliated by something else. They have to be high school students affiliated with their student athletic association. So with AIA or the AIA equivalent of other states. Now, if your students want to go play in a tournament on a weekend on their own and they're calling themselves the Rocketeers, but it has nothing to do with your school, it doesn't have your school name, you didn't organize it, that's completely okay. What's not okay is for you as the coach to go find a scrimmage, to go find a competition, to register your students for a tournament during the regular season. So from January 28th, um, through April, that's when you are not allowed to scrimmage or compete against other non-high school teams. So scrimmages through websites like Gangster or even local tournaments, those are not allowed unless you can verify that they are a high school only team that is affiliated with their student associate, with their athletic association. Again, if your students as a group of friends go and find their own scrimmages on their own time, perfectly okay. That is up to them. All right. The one thing clarification we did get, the Sundown tournaments for Smash hosted by PVCC have been approved by AIA. PVCC is only going to open those to schools that are part of AIA, and they will, as a backup, have the advisory committee review those registrations to ensure that only AIA schools are registered so that it does not violate any bylaws. Again, in-season tournaments must be by AIA. Sundown tournaments have been approved. Name, image, and likeness. I strongly recommend that you watch this video on this link. It explains it way better than I could. Essentially, kind of the Cliff Notes version, AIA does have rules against the NIL. So that is a student cannot be tied, an NIL cannot be tied to an athletic performance. And that is about when a student is getting compensation for their athletic ability. Cannot involve the school. It cannot involve the school's or district equipment, cannot endorse products or activities that would violate the school district's policies. Any parent must notify the school NAD of any NIL contract or agreement within 5 school days. So this comes down for like sponsorships, essentially. So as far as I understand, any sort of even the monetary compensations for like tournaments if a student goes on their own, that's completely fine. It's not, they can't be like sponsored by Nike or Monster for what they do within the school. So they can't be in their Gilbert jersey, and a picture where they're being sponsored by somebody else. That would violate the NIL. That video is a short video, and it breaks it down on what is and isn't allowed, and if there is an NIL contract, how to go about it so that you as a school and as a team are not penalized for an NIL violation. Your athletic directors will have a lot more information on this if you have any questions or wonder if something falls into this, so you can make sure to ask. So no, any sort of practice gameplay is kind of considered a scrimmage. You are not allowed to compete against any other college teams. And I completely understand, like, yeah, there's, that's actually the concern that was brought up last year, that some schools had access to some of those higher level resources. That's what prompted a lot of this discussion. But we've been told that that is not allowed during the regular season if it's structured through the team, and if it's structured through you, that's where there is that challenge. Yeah, no, you can do that in the off season. So you can do that in the fall season, just not during the regular season. All right. Smash Bros. The only update is that Steve is allowed. I know a lot of students are happy about that. It was about the only major change that was made. League of Legends, summoner names cannot be changed once the season starts. Professor is allowed. That is an add-on. It essentially just gives you timers. It can show you some builds, but we've established it doesn't really help your gameplay. So that is allowed. However, recognize that it won't be in the computers for state championship. So just realize it won't be available for that. Third-party sites are allowed for picks and bans. So we shared one that will work. Just coordinate with your opponent with enough time. Common questions that we've gotten. We end the year every year with a survey trying to get feedback and answer questions. And we go through every single suggestion and every single question that is proposed. And we address them by making changes, or we discuss them and realize that, there isn't a change that can be made. So some of the commonly asked questions is, why can't we play everyone in our group? In order for us to play everyone in the group, we would have to have a specific number of people in the group, which we can't necessarily do that because it'll depends on how many registrations we get, right? So in order for 6 teams to play each other, there's only so many weeks that you can do that, right? So because we're limited to 11 weeks, there's only so many teams that could be in that group. But so let's say that's 11, but we had 24 teams register, right? So we can't, if we would do 2 teams of 12, we could do 3 teams of 8. So at that point in the 11 weeks, you're not going to be able to play everyone. It does create some situations where even some teams might get a bye week and some teams won't. That we can't do much about it right now because it's dependent on the number of teams that register for that specific title. Eventually, once we grow enough that we could potentially go to divisions like traditional sports, then we can have those conversations for everyone to pay everyone, similar to how traditional sports will do, with their their regional games and then their division games. But right now we're still growing, and it's completely dependent on how many teams register. Second common question is, how are groups created? This year, our groups will be created based on your standings from last year. So spring season of 24, the final standings is what will decide the group placement. So, the number 1 team is in group 1, the number 2 team in group 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then we'll go back and go down the line. If this is your first year, You will just get put in either alpha order where there's space or at random, since we don't have any data for you. So our goal is using that method. Our teams will be a little bit more balanced, spreading out kind of our top contenders, and giving everyone an ample chance to make it to playoffs. Any questions before we move on to registration?
I had just one quick one.
Yes.
And it's probably in the rule book. I just missed it. This is a unisex varsity JV, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The only restriction we have is no junior high. I think the rule says you have to be 13 to compete. But yeah, there's no gender restrictions whatsoever.
13 and a high school freshman.
Yes, and a high school freshman. So some of our schools have like middle schools on campus. I know we do. We have their accelerated middle school. So I can't have those 8th graders compete on my team. Any other questions before we move on to registration?
I did have a question. I apologize.
You're fine.
It's in regards to if we have any questions in the league or anything like that. Do we need to come to the Discord or do we email you guys?
Do you mean questions about like
A
books?
match, yeah, a rule book, a match setup, or
Okay. Honestly, I do think Discord is the fastest way, and just at Playfly. Most of those things will be handled by Playfly staff. The advisory committee can help as far as like clarification of what the rule book means, or reminders about dates. But as far as like game match issues, potential violations, potential challenges, you want to go directly to Playfly. You can email them, but in my experience, Discord is significantly faster to get a hold of Playfly staff.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely. And yeah, if you look on the Discord, there's going to be several channels that are separated, like with like drop down arrows almost. There's like a Playfly channel, and then a college connection. I'm trying to see it on my PC over here. And then we have one that's like general. If you go to the top to the Playfly one, there's Playfly feedback, game day support, League of Legends, Smash Brothers, Rocket League, and then IT support. So it is pretty separated. Just go into whichever one it applies to and start with at Playfly, and then type in your challenge, your issue, what school, what game, any links, any images of things that are going on, and a Playfly staff member will be there to help. All right. Any other questions before we go to registration? All right, so I did see somebody ask, registration is open, and it will stay open through preseason. When is the last day for varsity to register, Joe?
Should be the 20th, I believe.
Okay. So you have 13 days to register your team. So we're going to walk you through on what is necessary in order for you to register your team. So obviously, first, coach, you've got to have an account. If you don't have an account with Playfly, you need to reach out to Playfly ASAP. Email them what school, your name, and they will get your school account created. Once you're on there, you will add a team. You will add players. And then once your players have been added, you add them to your roster. Once you have a full roster, then yes, you can join the season. So here is what that looks like. Once you have your account, you will go to create new team, add team, and in the drop down, you will choose whatever title you are creating a team for. Valorant is there just because we were being ambitious and hopeful that it was going to be approved, and unfortunately it was not, so that's okay. Playfly will send out those invoices. I want to say they usually do it somewhere around like week 5 to week 6, if I remember.
AIA actually sends them out.
AIA will send out. That's correct. Yeah, AIA will send the invoice usually directly to your athletic director. Though, like, I personally have never seen an invoice because my athletic director handles it. But yeah, AIA will send those out.
I'll go ahead and give you Brian's email so you can inquire if
Yeah,
needed.
absolutely.
And when do those go
Perfect.
out? Because my athletic director is really busy, and so stuff gets missed from time to time. So just so I can check up on it.
I want to say they'll go out somewhere around like week 5 or week 6 of the season.
Okay.
But you can always reach out. Brian Bolitho is our connection with AIA. He oversees esports for us. So he's your direct line for any specific AIA questions that we can't answer. So yeah, he's a great resource as well. Yeah, it doesn't get billed out like super early at all. So once you create a team based on what title you want, once you do that, you will give it a name. You'll be able to create your teams, add your roster. So at the bottom, it's kind of small on here, but you will add student. Again, they have to have already created an account. In order to invite students, you just go to this link. I like to email the link to my students. I have found that it's significantly faster that way. And they can use their own name. They will be able to connect their Riot ID. They can connect their Discord if they'd like. They can connect their Rocket League ID. Smash Bros, they can put in their gamer tag. Most of us play off of our campus switches, so it's not as big of an issue. But Rocket League and League of Legends, you want them to register their accounts. To add a user to the team, you will go to a player, you'll select a user. It'll be a huge drop down of all of your team members, and you can add them to whichever team you desire. Once your team is full, you have to have a full roster. So 5 for League of Legends, 3 for Smash, 3 for Rocket League. Once you have met those requirements, you can click Join Season. You can choose if it's a varsity or JV team, and then you will have joined the season, and your team has been added to it. It does not allow you to do that until your roster is full. So that needs to be your priority.
Once it's full to the minimum, so it's going to
Minimum.
show open positions. You can have double those open positions. So I answered John's question earlier. Minimum 3, double is 6.
Yep.
Etc.
You have to have that minimum to join the season, but you can have more, like we said, for your subs and stuff.
And can you edit that after you hit join season, or is it locked in?
No, you can most definitely edit your rosters. It only locks 24 hours before your next game. And then after your game is over, it unlocks again if you need to make any changes.
Okay, because my school had this program years ago and then it died out. Nobody wanted to do it. So I'm picking it up from scratch, and they thought it was a spring sport, so they weren't planning to do anything with it until February, until I read the book. And so we're in a mad dash. We have to still get our Switch here and a TV and all that stuff. But I have students that are probably going to trickle in now because it wasn't formally set up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So as long as I can change it through the progress
Yes.
of it, yeah.
Absolutely. And I have had situations where I'm like, I just need to put 3 kids in here so I can join the season. And then I can move them around on who's varsity, who's JV, who's this, who's that. But yeah, as long as you have your minimum in there before January 20th. Now, that being said, especially for varsity, please try to make sure that if you're creating a team that you have students that are going to, follow through. Last year, we had a lot of teams quit after the season started, and it just created a lot of forfeits and a lot of gaps in our schedule. And it was just frustrating. I mean, it's not that it's not allowed. You can, if your kids all quit, then there's nothing you can do about it. But try your hardest to have those conversations with your students, so make sure they follow through. Yes, I need to go into my presentation and say allow anyone with a link. But I knew if I tried to do it while I was presenting, it was going to be a disaster. So let me go in here right now and change it. Everyone should be able to have access now. If you try the presentation again, you should have access now. I changed it to anyone with the link. Any other questions? about anything we've discussed, or maybe something we didn't talk about that you have questions about.
Is it pretty, what's the word? Like the ease of use of it, is it pretty easy to understand once you actually get into it?
Yes.
I'm just worried that I'm gonna have a hard time connecting the
Let
kids
me
to the other school.
go in here and I can show you. If no one has any other questions, we can wrap up. And I'll just show you off of what it looks like. Let me go here.